We have a team covering it all, from Biden's announcement and endorsement to reaction from Capitol Hill and the Trump campaign and how it could reshape the November election.
Let's begin with NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joining us now from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Mike, good morning. So the president was under relentless pressure from within his own party to step aside ever since that debate more than 3 weeks ago. It seems like eons ago. So what do we know about why and when President Biden decided to drop out of the race? Walk us through how we got to this point now with just 106 days to Election Day.
It's really incredible, Joe. And to go all the way back, President Biden's career in Democratic politics began 54 years ago when he ran for a county council seat here in Delaware, Newcastle County. He then ran for the Senate, won an upset victory 2 years later, 1972, becoming one of the youngest senators ever. In 2020, he realized a lifelong dream, becoming the nation's oldest president, finally reaching the Oval Office. But he had fully intended to run for a second term, to serve that second term, and to win that second term. But everything changed on June 27th with that very first question in that first debate against Donald Trump. President Biden, for the 25 days since, has fought relentlessly to try to stay in this race, to try to convince fellow party members that he could still do the job. But the pressure kept building intensely, even leading to some friction, real friction between him and even most senior leaders in his party, former President Obama, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Ultimately, the president sat down with his closest aides, the inner circle, over the weekend here in Rehoboth Beach. Saturday night, his closest advisors presented him with polling information about fundraising, literally everything, as one of them put it to me. And the president at that point made the decision that he was going to step aside. It was held in the closest of ranks until just moments before it was announced on Twitter yesterday he was stepping aside, and soon after making that endorsement, Vice President Harris to succeed him.
That was pretty quick. Right after he said he was stepping aside, he endorsed Vice President Harris. At this point, she's not the nominee, but how important was it for him to throw his support behind her, even if not all Democrats are on board yet, with Harris potentially at the top of the ticket?
Well, since there was so much conversation in the final 48 hours about what the handoff process would look like, would the president endorse the vice president? There was some pressure on him not to do that, including from some other leaders who want to see an open process for other people to come and step forward. But there was also counter pressure from some of the president's closest political supporters. You'll remember he won the nomination in part because of his strong victory in South Carolina. Whose victory he believed helped win him that? Jim Clyburn, the congressman from South Carolina. That was something that President Biden felt truly to his core, that just as he felt spurned in 2016 when he wanted to run for president and he didn't have the support of President Obama, he had to return the favor now and make sure his vice president had his full support going forward.
So, Mike, a source familiar with the campaign says the president and vice president did speak several times ahead of that announcement yesterday. How did Vice President Harris spend the rest of her day after the news broke? And considering we know the president's recovering from COVID, but when might we see either of them in the wake of this huge decision?
Well, as you say, the president and vice president spoke multiple times yesterday, even before that circle expanded to let others know about the president's decision. The vice president was at the Naval Observatory, the vice president's residence in Washington, surrounded by her close advisors as well as members of her family. She made more than 100 calls, we're told, to other party leaders, including faith leaders, labor leaders, elected officials, to try to make sure that it was known to them and very clear to them that she intended to earn their support. She wasn't going to count on that. Among those she called was her pastor. She was wearing her Howard University hooded sweatshirt, we're told. She was making those calls into the evening. Now, we are going to see the vice president today at the White House on the South Lawn. It was a previously scheduled event that President Biden was supposed to headline, honoring the champions from college athletics across the country on the South Lawn of the White House. Because the president has COVID, it is the vice president who will fill in for him there. This will be the first opportunity we all have to see her now as the likely new Democratic nominee.
Mike Memoli, you have covered President Biden for years. No one better to be speaking with this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, now let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good morning. You know, President Biden came to this decision, more than 3 weeks after that debate performance against former President Trump. Walk us through your reporting with fellow colleagues behind this historic decision. I mean, what do we know about how the last few days unfolded for the president?
Yeah, I mean, the president was feeling the pressure as his former chief of staff, Ron Klain, told us last week, going into this weekend, he understood that there were a lot of people who wanted him to get out. In fact, some of them had told him in no uncertain terms that they wanted him to exit this race. So he goes to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, to his vacation home there. He has COVID. So it's a very small group that's around him, including, some family members, particularly First Lady Jill Biden, and then some very trusted aides, Mike Donnell and Steve Ricchetti, Annie Tomasini, and Anthony Bernal. And he continues to have conversations on Saturday with them. We know he had some phone calls. CNBC colleagues reported that Nancy Pelosi spoke to him, the former Speaker of the House, on Saturday. And then, as Mike Memoli just told us, he basically started to come to this decision on Saturday, perhaps the last Democratic insider to conclude that there was no path forward to him. He is frustrated, isolated in Delaware, angry at a party that turned on him, and still, grudgingly accepting by Saturday night that there really wasn't any way to sort of stop the bleeding of the Democratic Party turning on him.
John, was there any single data point or poll or any event that sort of was the final straw for him? I mean, there's conventional political wisdom that there was this Michigan poll out Sunday morning that showed him down 7 points there.
Yeah, I don't think it was one piece of data. I mean, I don't think any president, anybody who's looking to run for re-election, would look at a single poll and say that's it, I'm done. I think that I think it just took a long time. It was a little bit of a slow boil for him to get to the point where he realized that he wasn't going to weather this storm, that this was not going to pass as a news story, that Democrats weren't going to stop calling for him to exit. There was sort of a drip, drip, drip of his fellow Democrats doing that, and the opposite of the drip, 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 which is the donors turning off the spigot to his campaign. So there was not going to be enough money to run against Donald Trump. All of these things, I think, just kind of combined. And he knew he didn't have much time to make a decision. In order to allow his successor, and he obviously has endorsed Kamala Harris, to have a shot at Trump.
John, you and I spoke the morning after the debate when you reported people were already saying he needed to throw in the towel. So the towel has now been thrown. So let's talk about what's next for Democrats. Their national convention begins 4 weeks from today in Chicago. Even with the president's backing, we have to keep in mind, VP Harris says she intends to, quote, earn and win the nomination. She has to do that. How will she do that? How is it going to work?
I mean, what else would she say, Joe? And by the way, thank you for remembering that reporting from 25 days ago, 26 days ago. It's been a heck of a stretch in politics. Look, I think that, first of all, the Democratic Party has not yet fully agreed on how their nomination process is going to work this time. They had decided to do a virtual roll call before their convention to do the nomination of the presidential candidate. So we're going to find out a little bit more about that this week. The Democratic Party's, the Democratic Convention's Rules Committee is supposed to meet. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. But let me just step back for 1 minute here. There's nobody who would challenge Kamala Harris who would have any legitimacy or chance of winning a nomination over her who's going to run. We've already heard those people endorse her, maybe one or two exceptions of the people who are at the top of the list who have yet to endorse her. We've seen endorsements from enough people at the top of the Democratic Party to believe that there's not really going to be a choice for delegates. So she's going to say that she needs to earn the nomination. But this process is going to be pretty fast-tracked for two reasons. Number one, the party can do that, can fast-track the process a little bit. But even more important, she's got the support she needs.
So you don't think somebody emerges on the sidelines here and challenges her?
I don't. I've always thought that and look, I could be wrong, but I've always thought that the end result of this was going to be that Democrats landed on Kamala Harris. And the question was always, how long will it take? Will it be ugly in between, a Biden exit and Harris being nominated? But it's hard to see how that gets denied to her unless she does something in the next couple of days, publicly that is like Biden in the debate. I mean, she's on a track to get this.
Right, John says it won't be ugly. It will not be an ugly political landscape. Thank you, John. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John. Let's take a deeper look at the possibilities for the Democratic ticket this November. Bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark. So, assuming it is going to be VP Harris, we don't know that yet, but as John indicates, unlikely there's going to be much of a competition here. What does the polling tell us about a possible matchup between former President Trump and the current VP?
So, Joe, all we end up having are the hypothetical polls that were conducted before yesterday's big news. And the polling ended up showing that Vice President Kamala Harris was running about the same as President Joe Biden against Donald Trump. Our own NBC national poll had Biden trailing by 2 points nationally. It also had Harris trailing by 2 points nationally. And the Fox News poll and others have shown that similar dynamic. Now, there are some polls, both national and battlegrounds, that show Harris performing maybe 1 or 2 points better against Donald Trump. And do remember that 1 or 2 points it could end up being decisive in a presidential contest. It's also worth noting that the numbers could change after yesterday's very big news. And so we need to keep that in mind. But we also need to brace ourselves for the possibility that this race today and over the next 106 days is very similar to the ones that we were covering before yesterday's big news.
You know, Mark, how important will the running mate be for Vice President Harris or the vice presidential running mate for the presidential candidate, Kamala Harris?
Who is now a VP.
Who is now a VP. How might it fit the profile in terms of current job, position, state? Build for us, I guess, the ideal vice presidential nominee.
So, Christine, we're about to embark on a humongous story over the next 4 weeks heading into the Democratic convention on who will that running mate end up being for Vice President Kamala Harris. And oftentimes, historically, the vice president doesn't matter all that much. 1960, LBJ certainly helped out the Kennedy ticket in a state like Texas. And so getting someone who ends up coming from one of the battleground states could end up be important. Also, someone who ends up balancing out Vice President Harris's strengths and weaknesses. And do note that, in this race, Kamala Harris isn't the incumbent. She is a vice president. And so someone who she ends up saying that this person will be able to help me govern, I think could be a big story and a bigger vice presidential pick than we've had in the past.
Mark, let's put some names to the profile. You've got Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. You got Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, who's a two-term governor in a red state. You've got Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who, like Harris, made that run for the White House in 2020, or someone like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a state the Democrats really need to win. What could any of them offer?
So let's kind of put them in different buckets, Joe. One are the battleground state folks. As you mentioned, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania being in a really important battleground state. Similarly, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, another key battleground state. Another battleground person is Senator Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. And, just like as I mentioned in 1960, getting a vice presidential pick who could help you in one state could end up being very, very important. Joe, you also mentioned Pete Buttigieg, one of the stars from the Biden cabinet and one of Kamala Harris's 2020 rivals. And then there are some other 2028 names like Governor Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, the governor from Illinois, and sometimes into having a vice presidential pick to make sure that they're on your team come 2028 if Kamala Harris is able to be the nominee and win this contest 100 plus days from now.
One step at a time. Mark Murray, appreciate your analysis this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Let's get more reaction this morning to President Biden ending his reelection bid from Democratic Congressman from Rhode Island, Gabe Amo. Congressman Amo previously worked in both the Biden and Obama administrations. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You worked for the president before you were elected to Congress. I wonder what you imagine the last 3 weeks or so have been like for him and how difficult this decision was for him to make.
Well, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. I think it's been a period of reflection, a reflection on so much of the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris White House and administration, and also a reflection on all of the work that needs to come ahead. And so I was personally touched by the president's patriotic decision to put country over self and to make sure that we can secure a future that prevents Donald Trump from getting to the Oval Office and hopefully elevates Vice President Kamala Harris to the presidency.
So you, along with many other Democrats, are already endorsing Vice President Harris to replace President Biden as the Democratic candidate. Recent polls do show her polling, as we just discussed, around the same level as Mr. Biden, maybe slightly better. With that in mind, do you think she has a better chance of beating former President Trump? And one thing that immediately comes to mind is thinking of the fact that black voters were so important to President Biden winning in 2020. There's been a lot of information, a lot of polling telling us he doesn't have as strong a support this time around. Same with young voters. Does that change with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket?
Well, look, I think polls are a snapshot in time, and they're about possibilities. Now, hopefully, when the vice president earns and wins the nomination, that is going to be a reality. And I do think the numbers will reflect that, because she brings a great amount of preparation and a great amount of positioning to be an effective nominee. She has a foreign policy background. She has led on critical issues at the White House on reproductive freedom and gun rights. And she is going to present to the ultimate contrast, the prosecutor versus the felon. And you're going to hear it over and over again because it's true. And that is Donald Trump's worst nightmare.
There are other Democrats who have stopped short of endorsing Vice President Harris, most notably former President Obama, who you also previously worked for. He said he has, quote, confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. Were you disappointed that he didn't immediately throw his weight behind her?
No, look, President Obama is revered and is a party leader, and he believes in us having an open process. And we are going to have an open process as Democrats. Others will have the opportunity to put their names forward. But to me, the choice is clear. The vice president is well positioned because she has worked hand in glove with President Biden to deliver on the promise of all of the great historic legislation that has come through and the real work that we have to do to continue to invest in the American people. So I look forward to President Obama's voice as part of this dialogue. But I believe we will come together and come out stronger with Vice President Harris as our nominee.
Congressman Amo, so nice to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Former President Trump quickly spoke out yesterday, calling Mr. Biden the worst president in U.S. history, criticizing him for border and immigration issues and his energy policies. Well, now the Trump campaign will have to rework its strategy based on whoever is chosen as Mr. Biden's replacement. NBC's Garrett Hake joins us now with more about the Trump campaign. Garrett, you spoke with Trump yesterday. What else did he have to say?
You know, Joe, I got the sense he was having a hard time making the pivot to potentially going after Vice President Harris as his new opponent. He spent most of our conversation attacking Joe Biden, as you said, calling him the worst president in U.S. history, suggesting he would undo that damage. And that he said President Biden basically should never have run. He should have stayed in his basement. I think not the kind of thing you would expect, perhaps, from a candidate who now realizes after 600 days running against Joe Biden, he's got to run against somebody else.
Yeah, so how does his strategy, I guess, change from here going out? I mean, does he still continue to attack the economy and energy policy and try to put Kamala Harris's face on it?
Yeah, look, I think the issue sets here are going to stay largely the same. I think you're going to hear a heavy focus on immigration. You're already seeing it from Republicans reminding folks that Kamala Harris was put in charge of, you know, in the actual reality, what's called the root causes of immigration. The way Republicans describe it is that she was made the border czar and failed to stop illegal immigration at the southern border. Expect to hear a lot about that. Expect to hear questions about why she didn't do more to, you know, fight inflation or kind of pick your Biden policy and attack Kamala Harris to it. I think you're also going to hear a lot about her as a San Francisco liberal, her background as a prosecutor back in California. It's the kind of coded language that can work to fire up Republicans to vote against somebody they may not know as much about.
So, Garrett, we know that Trump held his first campaign rally this weekend since the assassination attempt, his first rally since choosing his running mate, J.D. Vance. What was the atmosphere like? We know the Republicans were united last week. Did we hear anything new about the message to voters?
Yeah, a couple things interesting about this rally, Joe. First of all, it was completely indoors, which I think is what we're going to see from the Trump campaign going forward. I'd be very surprised if we ever saw another large outdoor rally from Donald Trump or his running mate ever again. My colleagues who were in the room said this was some of the most positive energy they had ever heard at a Trump rally. A lot less in terms of the crowd, the sense of kind of grievance and anger, frustration at the media that we so often hear. The bottom line is Republicans left their convention in Milwaukee last week feeling incredibly united and more or less locked in that they were going going to win this race. Obviously, it's a totally different race this morning, Joe, and I'll be very curious to see what the trail is like today with J.D. Vance campaigning in Ohio and in Virginia, a state that the Republican ticket hoped to put in play against Joe Biden. Whether it's still on the table against Kamala Harris is one of those mysteries we're going to be trying to solve over the next couple of weeks.
So many questions about what this change does to those battleground states. All right, Garrett, thank you so much.
All right, let's turn to Capitol Hill to get a sense of the broader political reaction from both Republicans and Democrats to President Biden's decision to drop his re-election campaign.
Well, Democrats are praising his decision, calling it historic and patriotic. Republicans are once again seizing the opportunity. They're calling out the president's apparent decline and questioning his ability to lead the country.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us this morning with the latest reactions from lawmakers on the Hill. Good morning. It's been more than 3 weeks for Democrats, tumultuous weeks for Democrats following that debate. However, President Biden's decision to leave this race has now been met with a fresh wave of support and optimism from some in his party, many of whom have been calling for him to step aside. What have we heard from Democrats in the wake of this, this political shock this weekend?
A political shock this weekend, but I'll tell you, on Capitol Hill, we have felt every single hour of every single one of those days that have elapsed from that June 27th debate all the way up until yesterday's decision. And I think those shockwaves are still making their way through the Capitol, where lawmakers are finally going to be back in town today. So I'm sure they're going to have a lot to say on this. But look, most Democrats are doing exactly what Congressman Amo just did, which is say that they appreciate Biden's years of service, point to the legislative accomplishments that he led them in passing over the course of the last several years. And then, of course, in most cases, throwing their weight behind Kamala Harris. Of course, there are some notable exceptions. For example, we haven't heard from leadership in an official capacity on this, but that also could have a few different explanations, which I know we can get into. On the other hand, we are watching some Democrats say that they regret this process had to play out at all. Those voices are, of course, a smaller percentage of the larger Democratic apparatus, where I would tell you most of them are coalescing behind Kamala Harris in a way that I, as someone who's covered her for years, haven't seen and didn't think we would.
Ali, let's talk about the Republican side here. Many lawmakers, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, are demanding that President Biden resign, saying if he's not fit to run for president, he's not fit to serve out the rest of his term. Clearly, this is politics at play here, but what more can you tell us about the GOP reaction?
Politics at play in Washington.
Yeah, imagine that.
Of course it is, Joe. You're right to point it out. But this is, I think, always where it was going to go on the Republican side of this. And we watched Garrett lay out the way that the Trump campaign has been putting the stakes around this. But for Republicans on Capitol Hill, the idea that they are now saying that Biden should not be able to finish out his term is sort of where we anticipated this going. And it's also why you saw many Democrats in their statements, even when they were calling for Biden to step down, they made very clear that this was a political concern, not a medical concern, in large part because they didn't want their Republican colleagues or for Democrats to have to be put in the position of saying, we think that Biden can serve his term, but not continue to run for re-election. So this has always been a political question. Nevertheless, Republicans drawing that line from a poor debate performance to something deeper and saying that's why Biden should step down. I think those calls, I think we can all agree, are going to fall on deaf ears. But that's where the Republicans are, at least on the Hill side of this, as the Trump campaign and other Republicans try to play the political campaign side of it.
Ali, I think you're the perfect person to ask this next question about the road ahead for Vice President Harris as a female candidate, because you literally wrote the book. You wrote the book on this. It's called Electable: Why America Hasn't Put a Woman in the White House Yet. VP Harris has already broken a bunch of major, boundaries as a woman in American politics. But what can you tell us about the obstacles she still has to overcome in 2024?
That yet is really doing a lot of work in the last 24 hours, I have to tell you. And I have heard the outreach from people who have reread parts of the book, especially the chapters where I detail what it was like to be on the campaign trail with Kamala Harris. There were real moments of sexism. There were real moments of racism. Certainly all of those things combine to kind of lend an idea of why we saw the first few years of her vice presidency be so tumultuous. There were some of the criticisms of her during that time, especially when she was dealing with the U.S.-Mexico border. People didn't think she was up to that task. Of course, that is one of the most vexing issues in American politics. Her allies would have told you that. And so I really spent a lot of time parsing through the way we make sense of someone like Vice President Kamala Harris, who is both historic in being the first Black woman and woman of color in the vice presidential role, but also then having to adhere to all of the norms that came before her, that a vice president is largely just another vessel for the president of the United States. If they are stepping out cross out of those lines, they're not doing a good job. And I think Kamala Harris did the best job of that over the course of the last few weeks, being loyal, being steadfast, certainly not doing anything publicly or privately to get in front of her boss. But I think the one thing that Harris has, and this is both, I think, the blessing and the curse of being in this moment as the vice president who's now thrust into the spotlight, is the one thing she has to carry that President Biden never did is the barrier of covering the imagination gap for the American people. People need to imagine that a woman can actually be in the White House. The blessing to this is that lends some historic energy behind it. You're seeing it in the fundraising. The negative to that is that people can be scared off by things that they haven't seen be successful before. The entire metric of electability was a big part of why the women who ran in 2020, including Harris, never fully got their shot at getting that nomination. Of course, for Harris, she had a lot of other problems, a campaign that was really chaotic. It never really got off the ground. She herself struggled with major policy points, but many of her allies would say that those years in the White House on really one of the biggest stages you could possibly be on have been a chance for her to get better, have been a chance for her to grow. And you see that now as the news cycle has turned to a moment where abortion access and Black maternal mortality, all of these key issues, democracy, small d democracy, all of these issues are now squarely in the wheelhouse of the vice president. It's why her allies feel she is perfectly matched for this moment.
Ali Vitale, thank you so much. 106 days to go.
No one's counting.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.